The night was filled with music, laughter, and glittering lights at the grandest wedding reception in the city. Billionaires and politicians mingled, cameras flashed, and the scent of expensive champagne filled the air. But in the middle of all the luxury, something terrifying happened. Grace, the only daughter of the powerful Kelvin, suddenly clutched her throat. She staggered, eyes wide, gasping for air. Her friends screamed, but none dared to touch her. She collapsed on the marble floor, choking, helpless, her life slipping away. From the corner, Daniel, a poor driver hired for the night, saw the scene unfold. Without thinking twice, he rushed past the stunned crowd. He knelt beside Grace, tilted her head, and sealed his lips over hers in desperate resuscitation. 1, 2, 3 breaths. Then suddenly, Grace coughed violently, air rushing back into her lungs. She gasped, trembling but alive. The entire hall froze. Then whispers cut through the silence like dangerous object. Did the driver just kiss her? Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs to laughter, and laughter to insults. Grace sat up weakly, but her father's furious eyes burned through the room. Kelvin stormed forward, his voice like thunder. "You touched my daughter?" The silence deepened, every eye on Daniel. But Daniel's chest still heaved from saving her, his voice cracked but firm. "I saved her life, sir." Little did Daniel know that single act, an act of desperate compassion, would shatter reputations, awaken secret desires, and ignite a storm that would change every life in that hall forever. The party, once dazzling, now reeked of scandal. Guests murmured, phones flashed, recording every second of the humiliation. A senator's wife sneered. "What a disgrace, the poor always seeking shortcuts to wealth." Another guest muttered, "That driver planned this, a cheap stunt." Grace, still trembling, tried to speak. "He saved me. Without him, I would have passed away." But her voice was drowned out by mocking laughter. Even her closest friend Linda leaned in with a toxic whisper. "Grace, how could you allow a common driver to put his filthy lips on you?" Daniel stood frozen, heart pounding. He had expected gratitude, not ridicule. His shirt was torn from the rush, his lips trembling. Instead of applause, he received daggers of shame. Kelvin's voice roared above the chaos. "Security! Drag this man out!" Guards rushed forward, seizing Daniel by the arms. Grace screamed, "Father, stop! He saved me!" But Kelvin silenced her with one glare that sent chills down her spine. Daniel struggled, but the guards twisted his arms. His eyes met Grace's, hers, filled with fear and desperation, his with silent pain. The guests cheered his removal as though justice was served. But in that moment, deep inside Grace's heart, something stirred. Gratitude, admiration, and confusion. She could not shake off the image of Daniel's trembling lips giving her life when everyone else froze. What Grace didn't know was that the shame whispered in that hall would soon spread across the city like wildfire, and Daniel's name, instead of being remembered as a savior, would become a symbol of disgrace. The night air was cold when they threw Daniel out onto the street like trash. Visible injury trickled from his lip where a guard had struck him. His knees scraped the pavement, but he forced himself up, his pride intact though his body screamed with pain. The mansion behind him glowed with lights of wealth, but to Daniel, it looked like a fortress of cruelty. He limped away, each step heavy with disbelief. He had saved a life, yet was treated like a slave. When he finally reached home, his mother Evelyn opened the door. Her frail frame trembled as she saw his bruises. "Daniel, my son, what have they done to you?" Tears welled in her eyes as she cleaned his visible injuries. Through clenched teeth, Daniel recounted everything. Evelyn sighed deeply, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom. "Son, the poor are not allowed to cross the lines of the rich. Even if you save their lives, they will still look at you as less." Daniel clenched his fists. His pride as a man was bruised more than his body. Yet a flicker of fire lit his eyes. If saving someone is shameful, then I will carry that shame. But I will never apologize for giving life. What neither mother nor son knew was that Kelvin's wrath had only begun. In his mansion, Kelvin plotted revenge, and the city's gossip mongers sharpened their tongues, ready to destroy Daniel's name. Inside his luxurious study, Kelvin paced like a lion in a cage. His voice thundered across the room. How dare a filthy driver touch my daughter in front of my guests? His fists slammed the mahogany table, shaking glasses. Linda sat nearby, her lips curled in a sly smile. Sir, that boy humiliated your family name. People are already talking. If you let this slide, your enemies will use it against you. Kelvin's eyes blazed. He will regret the day he laid eyes on Grace. I will crush him, his family, his future. I will make him wish he never lived. Grace, standing at the door, cried out, Father, enough! Daniel saved my life. If you punish him, then you punish me too. Kelvin turned, his gaze like ice. You are blinded by weakness. That boy saw his chance and took it. He will never be more than dirt beneath our shoes. Grace's heart sank. For the first time, she saw her father's obsession with power naked and raw. She whispered, What if you are wrong? What if he is not what you think? Kelvin did not answer. His silence was more terrifying than his rage. Grace could not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's trembling face, his desperate breaths that pulled her back from passing away. Gratitude warred with confusion inside her. Why did her heart race when she thought of him? By morning, she made a daring choice. Disguised in plain clothes, she left her mansion and took a cab into the poorer part of the city. The air was different there. Dusty, raw, alive with struggle. For the first time, Grace felt the weight of reality beyond her golden cage. She found Daniel's small home. The roof leaked, walls cracked, but the smell of warm food drifted from inside. Evelyn greeted her with surprise but kindness. Grace stepped in, humbled by their simplicity. Daniel looked up from the corner, shock written on his bruised face. Why are you here? He asked, his voice edged with caution. Grace's eyes softened. Because you saved me, and I will not let your kindness be repaid with cruelty. You don't deserve this. Daniel shook his head. You shouldn't be here. If your father finds out, he will destroy me completely. But Grace's voice trembled with defiance. Let him try. He cannot control my gratitude, nor my heart. In that moment, something fragile yet powerful began between them, a bond that neither wealth nor pride could erase. But outside those walls, danger waited, for Linda's eyes were everywhere, and Kelvin's wrath had not cooled. The days that followed were heavy with whispers in the city. Everywhere Grace went, people stared. Some laughed, some whispered insults, but she ignored them. Each evening, she found herself drawn back to Daniel's world, where life was raw, painful, but strangely honest. One afternoon, she arrived with bags of food and medicine. Evelyn, Daniel's mother, welcomed her warmly despite the tension. My daughter, no one from your world comes here. Why are you risking yourself? Grace smiled faintly. Because gratitude is not weakness, ma'am. Your son saved my life. The least I can do is stand by him when the world chooses to mock him. Daniel entered, wiping sweat from his brow after a long day of job hunting. His eyes hardened when he saw the expensive bags on the table. Grace, you can't keep coming here. Your presence brings me trouble. My neighbors already whisper that I am luring you into my world for wealth. But Grace stepped closer, her voice steady. Let them whisper. You gave me back my breath. Now let me give you a friend. The silence between them stretched, charged with something unspoken. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the warmth of acceptance that wasn't laced with pity or mockery. As night fell, Grace helped Evelyn prepare dinner. The laughter that echoed in that little house was unlike the shallow laughter of her wealthy friends. It was real, grounded, and fragile. Yet outside in the shadows, unseen eyes watched. Linda had followed Grace. Her lips curled in satisfaction as she whispered into her phone. "Mr. Kelvin, you won't believe where your daughter spends her nights." That seed of friendship Grace had planted was about to be toxic before it could bloom. Linda's envy burned hotter with every secret visit she uncovered. Once she had basked in Grace's shadow, enjoying the benefits of being best friend to the billionaire's daughter. But now the attention Grace gave to a poor driver made her heart boil. She stormed into Kelvin's office one morning, a smirk on her lips. "Sir, forgive me, but you deserve to know the truth. Grace has been sneaking into the slums to see that driver." Kelvin's hand froze mid-signature. His eyes lifted, sharp as daggers. "What did you say?" Linda leaned forward, savoring his shock. "She cooks with his mother, eats in his broken home, walks their dusty streets. The same lips he used on her that night. She lets him close again." Kelvin's chest tightened with rage. He gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. "She dares defy me? She disgraces my name further?" Meanwhile, Grace remained unaware of the trap being set. She laughed freely in Daniel's company, finding joy in simple things. Shared bread, stories of struggle, Evelyn's wise folktales. But Daniel was restless. He sensed danger in the way neighbors whispered, the way strangers loitered near his home. One evening, he told Grace, "Your friend Linda doesn't smile at me. She looks at me like I've stolen something that belongs to her." Grace brushed it off. "Linda is harmless. She would never betray me." Daniel shook his head. "In this world, envy is dangerous than hunger." As Grace walked home that night, the chill in the air felt different, colder, heavier. She didn't know Linda was already weaving a web of lies, one designed to choke Daniel's name forever. By the next morning, the city's tabloids screamed with headlines, "Driver caught secretly courting heiress. Grace betrays family name with poor lover." Daniel's photo, grainy but damning, appeared everywhere. He was seen carrying groceries with Grace, laughing with her in the streets. What the world saw as innocent moments the papers twisted into scandal. At the mansion, Kelvin slammed the newspapers onto the breakfast table. "Read, Grace. See how far you've dragged my name through the mud." Grace's heart pounded as she scanned the cruel words. She tried to defend herself. "These are lies, they twist the truth." But Kelvin's fury drowned her words. "Lies? The world believes what it sees. Do you realize the shame you bring to me, to everything I've built?" At the same time, Daniel's neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some mocked him. "The driver thinks he's a prince now." Others spat in disgust. "He's dragging our name into trouble." Children pointed at him on the street, chanting, "Kiss the heiress." Daniel's fists clenched as he walked through the shame, his mother trailing behind, whispering, "My son, hold your head high. The storm passes, but dignity remains." But inside, Daniel was breaking. He had not asked for this. He had not courted wealth, yet wealth had dragged him into a pit of ridicule. Grace, trapped in her golden cage, whispered to herself in tears, "I thought love could heal, but maybe love only destroys when the world refuses to see its truth." The city had chosen its story. Daniel was no longer a savior. He was a scandal. And scandals, once lit, are almost impossible to extinguish. The mansion trembled with fury that night. Kelvin's voice thundered across the dining hall. "Grace, you will end this madness. You will cut ties with that boy this instant." Grace, trembling but determined, raised her voice. "Father, Daniel saved my life. He did nothing wrong. Why must you destroy him?" Kelvin slammed his fist on the table, shattering a glass. "Because he is beneath you, because he stains my name. You are my daughter, not some stray to be won by a beggar." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but her voice cracked with courage. "Father, you talk of shame, but what of gratitude? What of humanity? Daniel gave me breath when the world froze. Does that mean nothing to you?" Kelvin's face darkened. You are blinded by emotions. One day you will see. Love cannot erase class. He is dust, and you are gold. And dust and gold do not mix. Grace's heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to fight, but she saw the futility in her father's hardened eyes. With trembling hands, she whispered, "Then I will choose dust if that dust saved me." Kelvin stood frozen, her words cutting deeper than any blade. But instead of softening, his rage doubled. "If you walk that path, Grace, you will walk it alone." As Grace stormed from the hall, tears streaming, her footsteps echoed like thunder. She realized this was no longer just about love. It was about tension, between a father's pride and a daughter's heart. Back in their small, dimly lit home, Daniel sat silently by the window, staring at the flickering lights of the city beyond. His heart was heavy with shame and confusion. Evelyn placed a steaming bowl of soup before him. She watched her son's silent struggle, then spoke softly. "Daniel, do you know the story of the dove and the ant?" He looked at her, weary. "No, Mother. Tell me." She began, her voice gentle but steady. "One day a hunter tried to take the life of a dove. An ant bit the hunter's foot, saving the dove. But do you know what the hunter did? He crushed the ant under his boot. That is life, my son. Sometimes the world punishes those who save it." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening. "So what should I do, Mother? Should I stop fighting? Should I accept this as my fate?" Evelyn reached for his hand. "No. You must keep your dignity. You must prove that a man's worth is not measured by the gold he carries, but by the heart he protects. Your suffering today is not the end. It is only the beginning of a story bigger than you." Daniel's chest rose and fell with new resolve. He whispered, "Then I will not bow. If the world sees me as dust, I will rise until dust blinds their eyes." Evelyn smiled faintly, but deep in her heart, fear lingered. She knew storms far dangerous than gossip were already brewing. The mansion was unusually quiet, but beneath its silence danger stirred. Kelvin sat in his study, his fingers drumming against the desk. He had tried silence, then anger, but nothing seemed to sway Grace. His pride was bleeding, and the city was watching. Just then, Linda slipped in, her heels tapping softly on the marble floor. Her voice carried a sweetness laced with venom. "Sir, forgive me, but you have underestimated your daughter's stubbornness. She continues to see Daniel." Kelvin's eyes snapped up. "How do you know this?" Linda pulled out her phone, showing grainy photos of Grace laughing in Daniel's arms, his hand brushing her hair away from her face. To any other eye, it was innocent. But to Kelvin, it was betrayal etched in pixels. He slammed his fist on the table. "This ends tonight. That boy will learn that when you defy me, you pay with everything you hold dear." Grace, in the meantime, was at Daniel's house helping Evelyn fold laundry. She felt safe in the warmth of their home, unaware of the storm about to hit. Daniel warned her again, his brow furrowed. "Grace, my instincts tell me we're being watched. Something doesn't feel right." But Grace brushed it aside with a faint smile. "Paranoia is the cage of the poor, Daniel. Trust me, nothing can touch us here." Yet, as the night deepened, headlights blazed outside their window. The sound of car doors slamming echoed like thunder. Daniel's chest tightened. Evelyn clutched her son's arm, whispering, "The storm has come, my child." What waited beyond that door was not just trouble. It was the beginning of a tension Daniel never asked for but could no longer escape. The knock wasn't a knock. It was a pounding, violent, and merciless. Before Daniel could rise, the door burst open. Men in black suits stormed in, grabbing him by the collar. Evelyn cried out, "Leave my son alone," but she was shoved aside. Grace screamed, clinging to Daniel's arm, "Stop this madness, Father, please." Her voice trembled as Kelvin stepped through the doorway, his presence as cold as steel. Kelvin's glare was enough to silence the room. "Daniel," he spat, "you've played your game well, but tonight it ends." Daniel's voice, though strained, held no fear. I played no game, sir. I saved your daughter's life. That is my only crime. Kelvin's jaw tightened. Your crime is daring to touch what you could never afford. You thought you could stain my family name and walk away? You will pay. Guards yanked Daniel forward, dragging him outside. Grace threw herself at her father's feet, sobbing. Please don't do this, he is innocent. But Kelvin's eyes remained like stone. You call him innocent? Then let the city decide. By tomorrow the courts will hear that he tried to victimize you the night he kissed you. The words cut Grace like a sharp object. She froze, unable to breathe. Daniel's face darkened, fury blazing in his eyes. You twist the truth to suit your pride. But remember this, sir. Truth may bend, but it never breaks. As they dragged him away into the night, Grace's scream echoed through the street. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering. Daniel was no longer just a poor driver. He was now branded a dangerous. The courthouse overflowed with people. Journalists jostled for pictures, microphones shoved into Grace's face as she walked in. Did he victimize you? They shouted. Are you protecting him? Daniel stood in the dock, his hands cuffed, his face swollen from a night in a cold cell. Yet his eyes burned with defiance. He refused to bow his head. Kelvin sat at the front row, his expensive lawyers lined up like soldiers ready for tension to escalate. Linda whispered beside him, her voice dripping toxic. By the time this ends, no one will ever believe Daniel again. The judge called the case. Kelvin's lawyer painted a picture of Daniel as a scheming opportunist who used a fake rescue to force intimacy on Grace. Gasps filled the courtroom. Daniel clenched his fists, his knuckles white. When Grace was called to testify, the room fell silent. Every eye fixed on her as she stepped forward. Her father's glare weighed on her like chains. Her lips trembled, but then her voice rang clear. Daniel did not victimize me. He saved my life. Without him, I would be buried today. That is the truth. Whispers surged across the room. Kelvin's face hardened like granite, but the judge leaned forward, his voice measured. In the absence of evidence, and with the victim's testimony, this case cannot stand. Daniel is free. The gavel struck. Relief surged through Daniel, but it was short-lived. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Though free, Daniel's name was stained. To the world, he would always be the driver who dared to kiss a billionaire's daughter. Freedom came at a price. Daniel walked the streets, but people's eyes followed him with judgment. Some spat as he passed, others whispered cruel jokes. But through it all, Grace walked beside him. One afternoon, she met him at the taxi park where he tried to find work. No one wanted to hire him. A man sneered, I won't let scandal drive my car. Another spat at his feet. Grace watched the humiliation, her heart breaking. She stepped forward, her voice steady. If no one gives you a chance, then I will stand with you. Daniel, we will fight together. He looked at her, pain and gratitude warring in his eyes. Grace, your presence here only fuels the fire. People think you are my shield, but I do not want to live under your shadow. Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. You saved me when the world froze. Let me save you now. That evening she helped Evelyn cook dinner, laughing softly at the simplicity of their lives. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a spark of joy in the darkness. But outside their door, danger brewed again. Linda sat in her car, camera in hand, snapping photos of Grace and Daniel together. Each flash was another nail in their coffin. Daniel and Grace thought their bond was hidden, safe in the shadows of poverty. But Linda's envy would soon drag it into the cruel light of the world. The city's lights glittered in the distance as Daniel and Grace walked by the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight, but Daniel's heart was heavy. He stopped, his voice breaking the silence. Grace, this cannot continue. Your world will never forgive you for being with me, and my world will never stop mocking me for daring to reach you. Grace turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And what about my heart, Daniel? Should I cut it out because society commands it? Should I live in a golden cage and passed away a prisoner of my father's pride? Daniel looked away, fists clenched. Love is not enough. Love cannot put food on the table, cannot silence gossip, cannot change who I am. But Grace stepped closer, her hands trembling as they reached for his. Then let me tell you what love can do. It can heal wounds money cannot touch. It can give strength when the world strips you bare. Daniel, I love you. Not for what you have, not for who the world says you are, but for the man who gave me back my breath when I was about to pass away. Her words shattered the walls around his heart. Tears stung his eyes as he pulled her close. Their lips met in a kiss, no longer born of survival but of choice. A kiss that carried pain, defiance, and hope. But as they held each other by the river, unseen, Linda's camera clicked again. This time the photo would not only scandalize the city, it would destroy everything Grace still had left in her father's world. The next morning the city awoke to chaos. Newspapers splashed scandalous headlines across every page. Heiress and her driver caught kissing by the river. Billionaire's daughter chooses love below her class. The photos Linda had secretly taken were everywhere. Grace in Daniel's arms, their kiss under the moonlight frozen in cruel permanence. At the mansion, Kelvin's rage was volcanic. He hurled the paper across the room. She dares spit on my name again. His voice shook the very walls. Grace rushed in, pleading, Father, it's not what they say, it's love. But Kelvin cut her off with a roar. Love? With a driver? Do you know what you've done? You've destroyed every alliance, every ounce of respect I've built. Linda, lurking in the corner, feigned sympathy. Sir, I warned you. Grace doesn't see the shame she brings. Someone had to open your eyes. Kelvin turned to Grace, his words like thunder. From today, you are no longer my daughter. Leave this house, take your shame with you. Grace froze, her heart pounding. Tears blurred her vision, but her voice cracked with defiance. Then so be it. If standing with Daniel costs me wealth, then I will choose him over gold. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kelvin's eyes burned with fury, Linda's lips twitched in triumph, and Grace's world shattered. That night, Grace packed her belongings in silence. Her footsteps echoed through the mansion halls as she walked away from everything. Her luxury, her security, her father's love. She stepped into the unknown, carrying only her faith in Daniel. But what she didn't know was that love in poverty was a different battle, one that would test her heart more than her father ever could. The streets that once admired Grace now mocked her. She walked beside Daniel, her designer clothes traded for simple dresses. No chauffeurs, no bodyguards, just dusty roads and crowded buses. Their first night together in Daniel's small home was suffocating. The leaking roof dripped onto the floor, rats scurried in corners, and the hard mattress offered little comfort. Grace tried to smile through it, but Daniel saw the pain in her eyes. You don't belong here, he whispered. This life will break you. But Grace shook her head, tears welling. I chose this, Daniel. I chose you. If this is your world, then it is mine too. Days turned into weeks. Grace struggled with chores she had never done, fetching water, washing clothes by hand, cooking over firewood. Neighbors watched, some mocking, others pitying. Look at the billionaire's daughter fetching buckets like a servant, they sneered. At night, Grace's hands blistered, her body ached, but she forced a smile. Evelyn, frail but kind, often whispered, Child, love is strong, but hardship is stronger. Hold on if your heart is true. Daniel worked long hours as a driver for hire, returning each night with little money. Grace welcomed him with weary smiles, hiding her exhaustion. But in the shadows of her mind, doubts began to creep. Could love really sustain them when the world had turned its back? Unbeknownst to them, Linda continued feeding the press with stories. Grace's suffering was entertainment for the city. To some she was a fallen princess, to others a fool. The love that once seemed invincible was now under siege, not from her father but from hunger, ridicule, and the merciless weight of poverty. Life became a test of endurance. Grace woke each morning before dawn, her hands raw from scrubbing clothes, her body weak from hunger. She stumbled under the weight of water buckets, her once smooth skin marked with bruises. But Daniel, watching her silently, grew torn inside. He admired her courage, yet he hated himself for dragging her into misery. One evening, after a long day of driving, he came home to find Grace coughing violently by the fire. He rushed to her side, panic in his voice. "Grace, your body isn't used to this life. You're falling sick." She forced a weak smile. "I will adjust. I won't leave you, Daniel. Not for this." Her words pierced him, both a comfort and a burden. He sat beside her, his hands trembling as he whispered, "You deserve better, and I will find a way to give it to you." Their nights were filled with whispered promises. Daniel spoke of dreams, starting his own transport company, building a life where Grace would never be mocked again. Grace listened with hope, clutching his hand, believing in a future brighter than the present darkness. But reality was merciless. Money ran short, Evelyn's health declined, and neighbors grew crueler. Some mocked Grace openly. From silk beds to firewood kitchens, how long before she runs back to her father? Grace swallowed her pride, refusing to break. She told Daniel softly, "Let them laugh. Every tear I shed is proof that my love is stronger than gold." In the shadows, Linda watched with satisfaction. To her, Grace's suffering was a slow punishment for daring to choose Daniel over everything. But fate was about to deal a harsher blow, one that no strength of love could prevent. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by Grace's weak coughs. Daniel sat beside her, his hands buried in his hair. He had tried everything: extra shifts, odd jobs, skipped meals. But still, Grace grew weaker. One evening, he walked through the city, desperation pushing him to beg for help. He approached wealthy men, old clients, even strangers. "Please, my fiancée is sick. I just need money for her treatment," he pleaded. But most turned away, sneering. The driver who stole a billionaire's daughter. Go beg elsewhere. Daniel returned home empty-handed, his chest hollow with shame. He found Grace lying on the bed, her face pale, her breathing shallow. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Don't leave me, Grace. I'll find a way, I swear." Grace opened her eyes weakly, whispering, "Daniel, even if I passed away here, I don't regret choosing you. My love is my wealth." Her words shattered him. He clutched her hand, trembling, his heart raging against fate. Evelyn stood in the corner, her frail voice trembling. "Son, storms always come before dawn. Hold on. Do not lose yourself to despair." But Daniel's despair grew. He had given everything, yet it was not enough. For the first time, the fire in his eyes dimmed. He felt the cruel truth pressing in. Love may heal hearts, but it cannot heal a sick body without medicine, without money. And in that moment of weakness, he realized, if he didn't find a miracle soon, Grace's sacrifice would end in a grave. The storm came at dawn. Evelyn, Daniel's mother, collapsed suddenly while sweeping the compound. Grace screamed, rushing to her side. Daniel held his mother's frail body, his heart pounding in danger. They rushed her to the nearest clinic, but the doctor shook his head after minutes of examination. "She is too weak, malnourished, and her lungs are failing. We can only make her comfortable." Daniel's world shattered. He dropped to his knees beside his mother's bed, clutching her fragile hand. "No, Mama. Please don't leave me. You are all I have left." Evelyn's fading eyes softened as she reached up to touch his face. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. "My son, listen to me. Do not let pain turn you bitter. Do not let hatred define you. Your worth is not in gold, but in your heart. Grace." Hold him when I no longer can. Tears streamed down Grace's face as she nodded, clutching Evelyn's hand. I promise, Mama. I will never leave him. With a final sigh, Evelyn's hand slipped from Daniel's grasp. Silence filled the room. Daniel's scream tore through the walls, raw and broken. Grace held him tightly, her own sobs shaking her body. The woman who had been his anchor, his guide, his only family, was gone. And in her absence, Daniel felt a darkness rising inside him. But even in passing on, Evelyn's last words lingered, a warning, a plea, a reminder that pain could either destroy him or forge him into something greater. The small house was heavy with silence. Evelyn's passing away left Daniel hollow. He barely spoke, barely ate. At night, he sat outside staring at the stars, whispering to the wind as though his mother could still hear. Grace tried to comfort him. She brought water, cooked, even sat beside him in silence. But Daniel's grief turned into anger. He slammed his fist against the wall one evening, shouting, "If I had money, she would still be alive. Poverty killed my mother." Grace rushed to him, her voice trembling. "Daniel, don't blame yourself. You gave her everything you had. She passed away knowing you loved her." But her words only deepened his torment. He turned away, whispering, "Love isn't enough. Love doesn't buy medicine." Grace's heart ached. She had seen Daniel's strength, but now she saw him crumbling. She feared the bitterness Evelyn warned about was taking root. Meanwhile, Linda watched from the shadows. She had expected Grace to return broken to her father's mansion, but seeing her still standing with Daniel enraged her. She vowed to make Grace regret her loyalty. At Evelyn's burial, the neighbors whispered cruelly. The driver buried his mother like a pauper. Even his fiancé looks like a beggar now. Grace stood tall, ignoring their words, but Daniel's fists clenched at every insult. As the last handful of sand covered his mother's grave, Daniel whispered a vow. "I will rise. I will build a life that will silence every tongue that mocked her." But he didn't know that fate was already weaving the path to his rise, through pain, betrayal, and an unexpected turn of events. Daniel's vow to rise clashed with his reality. His taxi broke down beyond repair, his debts piled up, and Grace grew thinner with each passing week. Hunger gnawed at their lives. One evening, Daniel returned home to find Grace fainted on the floor. He rushed to her side, his hands trembling. When she opened her eyes weakly, her voice cracked. "I'm fine. Just tired." But he knew she was starving herself so he could eat. The sight broke him. He slammed the table and shouted, "I can't let you pass away like my mother, I won't." That night, he made a desperate decision. He went to Kelvin's mansion. Standing at the gates, he begged the guards, "Tell Mr. Kelvin I need to see him. I will do anything, anything for his forgiveness." But Kelvin, upon hearing Daniel's name, erupted with fury. "That boy? He ruined my daughter's future. Throw him out like the animal he is." Daniel was shoved into the mud, humiliated once again. Linda watched from the balcony, smiling with cruel satisfaction. Grace found him later that night, bruised and defeated. He buried his face in his hands, whispering, "Maybe your father is right. Maybe I'm just a driver who stole what he could never afford." But Grace held his face firmly, her eyes fierce with love. "No, Daniel, you are not a thief. You saved my life. You loved me when the world mocked me. You are worth more than all the gold in my father's house." Her words rekindled something in him. For the first time since Evelyn's passing, he lifted his head, determination flickering in his eyes. And so began Daniel's climb. Not with riches, but with resilience. Weeks later, an unexpected opportunity arrived. An old passenger Daniel once helped approached him with an offer. His name was Mr. Collins, a businessman who had watched Daniel's struggles from afar. "I remember you, son," Collins said, his voice steady. "You once drove me across the city in the rain, refusing extra pay because I had lost my wallet. That honesty stuck with me. I'm looking for a partner for a small logistics venture. I need someone hardworking, someone I can trust. Are you interested? Daniel's eyes widened, his voice trembling. Sir, I have no money, no experience. Collins smiled. What you have is worth more, integrity. I'll provide the capital, you provide the sweat. Together we'll see where it leads. Daniel hesitated, but Grace gripped his hand tightly. Take it, Daniel. This is the chance you prayed for. And so Daniel began working with Collins. Days turned into weeks of hard labor, organizing deliveries, managing drivers, learning the ropes of business. He was no longer just a driver. He was building something of his own. Grace supported him tirelessly, keeping their home in order, encouraging him through every setback. Slowly, their lives began to change. Food returned to their table. Hope returned to their hearts. But in the shadows, Linda seethed with rage. The story she had orchestrated, the fall of Grace and Daniel, was unraveling. Their resilience was making her look like a bitter villain. So she devised a darker plan, one that would not only destroy Daniel's business, but also ruin his name forever. Linda's hatred knew no bounds. She bribed one of Daniel's new employees, convincing him to sabotage a major delivery. A truck full of goods was deliberately delayed, contracts were broken, and clients threatened to withdraw. Daniel was summoned by Collins, his heart pounding as the older man slammed papers on the table. These mistakes cost us millions. Tell me the truth, Daniel. Are you sabotaging me? Daniel's face paled. Sir, I swear on my mother's grave I would never. But evidence had been planted. Fake receipts, falsified reports, all pointing to Daniel. Grace stood by him, tears in her eyes as she pleaded. Please, Mr. Collins, Daniel is innocent. Someone is framing him. Collins, torn between doubt and loyalty, gave Daniel one final chance. If this happens again, you're out. I cannot risk everything on trust alone. Daniel left the office broken, his dreams crumbling before his eyes. He whispered to Grace, No matter how hard I try, they'll always see me as just a poor driver. But Grace's voice rose with fire. Then prove them wrong, Daniel. Rise so high they choke on their lies. In that moment, Daniel made a vow stronger than before, not only to succeed but to uncover the hand behind his downfall. And when he found out Linda's role, the city would witness a reckoning. Late one night, Daniel overheard two employees whispering in the warehouse. Their words froze his heart. Linda paid me to mess up the delivery, one said nervously. She said the driver-turned-businessman must never rise. Daniel's chest tightened. His suspicions were true. Linda was behind everything. He stepped from the shadows, his voice thunderous. So it was her. She's been behind every humiliation, every pain we suffered. The men froze, stammering apologies. But Daniel's eyes burned with fury. He stormed home, his fists clenched. Grace saw the fire in his gaze and asked, What happened? He told her everything. Grace's hands trembled as she whispered, Linda will never stop until we are destroyed. Daniel, what will you do? Daniel looked at her, his voice steady but filled with vengeance. No more running, no more silence. Tomorrow, I will confront her, and the whole city will know the truth. Grace's heart raced with fear. She knew the storm about to unfold would change everything, not just for them, but for Kelvin, Linda, and the entire empire built on lies. The city's elite gathered at Kelvin's mansion for a business gala, a night of wealth and power. Laughter echoed through golden halls, glasses clinked, and the rich paraded their fortunes. But outside those glittering doors stood Daniel, his clothes plain yet his eyes blazing with purpose. Grace clutched his hand nervously. Daniel, are you sure about this? He nodded firmly. If I stay silent, Linda wins. Tonight the truth will speak louder than their lies. They entered, and instantly the whispers began. Is that the driver? How dare he come here? Others sneered. Look at Grace, dressed like a commoner. Kelvin spotted them, and his face darkened with fury. How dare you walk into my house after disgracing me? Before Daniel could respond, Linda stepped forward, feigning innocence. Kelvin, let me handle this. These people thrive on pity and lies. They don't belong here. Daniel's voice rose, steady but sharp. No, Linda, you don't belong here, because tonight your mask comes off. Gasps filled the hall. Guests leaned closer, hungry for drama. Daniel revealed the truth, how Linda had staged photos, bribed employees, and sabotaged his business. The corrupt worker he had overheard appeared, trembling, and confessed everything. All eyes turned to Linda. Her face flushed, her words stumbling. They're lying. It's all a setup. But the room had already turned cold. Kelvin's rage boiled, his voice like thunder. Linda, is this true? The silence was louder than denial. And in that silence, Linda's empire of lies began to crumble. Kelvin's fury shook the room. He turned to Linda, his eyes blazing. You humiliated my daughter, destroyed my business reputation, and destroyed my home with lies. Linda fell to her knees, sobbing. I did it for us, Kelvin. I did it because she didn't deserve him. She's meant for wealth, not poverty. But Kelvin silenced her with a cold glare. No, you did it for yourself. You couldn't stand that my daughter found happiness outside these walls. You ruined everything. Guests whispered in shock. Some shook their heads in disgust, others quietly slipped away, unwilling to be part of the scandal. Grace, her voice trembling but strong, stepped forward. Father, you turned me away for choosing love. Yet it was Linda who destroyed our family's honor. Can't you see? Money never protected us, it only blinded us. Kelvin's shoulders sagged, his pride breaking under the weight of truth. For the first time, he saw Daniel not as a driver, but as a man who stood for love, loyalty, and integrity. But the damage was done. Business partners pulled their support, investors whispered of betrayal, and Kelvin's empire trembled. The man who once ruled the city with iron pride now stood humiliated in his own mansion. Daniel, though vindicated, did not gloat. His voice was calm. Mr. Kelvin, I never wanted tension with you. I only wanted your daughter's happiness. Tonight proves one thing. Money without morals destroys faster than poverty ever could. Kelvin's eyes glistened, but whether with anger or regret, no one could tell. The aftermath of the gala shook the city. Linda was cast out, shunned by the same wealthy circles she once charmed. Whispers followed her everywhere. The schemer, the liar, the snake who destroyed herself. Kelvin, stripped of his pride, locked himself away for days. Grace tried to visit, but he wouldn't open the door. Daniel, however, went once, standing quietly outside, speaking through the walls. Sir, I lost my mother to poverty. I know the pain of loss. But don't let pride take away your daughter too. Forgiveness is harder than anger, but it heals deeper wounds. He left without expecting an answer. Grace and Daniel returned to their modest home. But life had changed. Colin's business, now cleared of Linda's sabotage, grew rapidly. Daniel became a respected partner, his integrity recognized across the city, and Grace, no longer mocked, became a symbol of loyalty. Women admired her sacrifice, men praised her resilience. She held her head high, proud of the life she chose. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Daniel whispered, Grace, we have walked through fire, but I promise you this is only the beginning. Together we will rise higher than they ever dreamed. Grace smiled, her eyes glistening. And when we rise, Daniel, we will rise with humility. That is the lesson this world has taught us. But fate had one more twist to deliver, the return of Kelvin, broken yet seeking something far greater than wealth. For the first time in years, Kelvin knocked on Daniel's door. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his once proud shoulders bent. Grace froze, her heart pounding. Father. Kelvin's eyes filled with tears as he looked at her. My daughter, forgive me. I drove you away, mocked your love, and nearly lost you forever. Pride blinded me. But tonight I stand here not as a billionaire, but as a father begging for another chance. Grace's tears flowed freely as she rushed into his arms. For a long moment, father and daughter wept together, the walls of pride collapsing. Then Kelvin turned to Daniel, his voice cracked. And you, the man I called worthless, you are richer than I ever was, because you gave my daughter what money never could, true love. I wronged you deeply. If you can find it in your heart, forgive me. The room fell silent. Daniel, remembering Evelyn's dying words, "Do not let pain turn you bitter," felt tears burn his eyes. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Kelvin's shoulder. "I forgive you, sir. For Grace, for Evelyn's memory, I choose peace over bitterness." The three embraced, and for the first time, love bridged the gap that wealth had once destroyed. The years that followed turned Daniel and Grace into legends of the city. Their logistics company grew into an empire, not built on greed, but on fairness and hard work. Workers praised Daniel for treating them like family. Grace started a foundation to help women rise from poverty, inspired by her own struggles. Kelvin, humbled, became their strongest supporter. Though his wealth had shrunk, his heart grew. He spent his remaining years proudly watching his daughter and son-in-law succeed where he had once failed. As for Linda, she faded into obscurity, a painful reminder that envy destroys faster than poverty ever could. On the anniversary of Evelyn's passing away, Daniel stood with Grace and Kelvin at her grave. He whispered softly, "Mama, your words live on. Pain didn't make me bitter. It made me stronger. And now, the love you blessed lives in every corner of our home." Grace held his hand, her eyes shining with tears, while Kelvin bowed his head in respect. From the kiss that saved a life to the trials that tested their souls, Daniel and Grace's story is more than love. It is a mirror of life itself. Wealth fades, power crumbles, but love, true love, remains the greatest treasure. Remember this: never judge a man by what he drives, but by how he loves. For it is not riches that build legacies, but hearts that endure. The screen fades, leaving the audience in silence, their hearts heavy with tears and hope. Dear viewers, you just heard a story that carries a powerful lesson, one that could change someone's life, open a mind, or heal a heart. But if you walk away without liking, sharing, or subscribing, it's like silencing the voice of our ancestors who passed down these tales. Don't let their wisdom fade. Don't be the reason the next person never hears this message. Like, share, subscribe. Let the story live on. Thank you for watching.